Bonjour tout le monde. Pour la réunion ce soir, je m'exprimer en anglais, mais si vous en avez des questions, s'il vous plaît, pardon, veuillez les poser tes questions dans la langue de votre choix. Okay? And I will get right into it. We are December, and normally we would have had this meeting next week, but of course we're right into sort of the mid of the holiday season at that point, and didn't want to interrupt anyone's festivities, so we moved it up. So my apologies if you're not able to come live with us, but hopefully you can see this recording. Just a reminder, we're an environment that we try to be welcoming to as many people as possible, and certainly we want to thank all of our Indigenous boxing members for being so generous with sharing our boxing gyms with us, this land with us, and we wish everyone all the best as we head into the middle of the winter. Looking on our agenda today, so we'll be talking about the pathway to LA and to Brisbane. We'll talk a little bit about the past U23 camp that has just wrapped up. We'll talk about the impact of nationals. We'll talk a little bit about sort of our long-term high performance plan, then into our national team plan for 2026. And then we have a little bit of information to share about the Youth Olympic Games, not as much as we would hope to, but unfortunately that's the situation we're in. We'll talk a little bit about the upcoming January camps. We'll talk a little bit about our U17, U19, U23 nationals in Calgary, and then some other notes and upcoming dates. So just a reminder, when we're looking at our pathway to the Olympics, so we've sort of tried to revise this a few times over the years, and this is where we're at now. So just a reminder that we've sort of got this 5-step system. So if you are interested in going to the Olympics, the first thing you need to do is you need to meet your provincial standards to attend nationals. At that point, you need to demonstrate performance to us, and you can do that through competition at nationals. You can also do that through performance as it's being assessed at nationals. Then the next step is you get categorized, and we have 4 different levels of categorization. The first 2 that we go through are sort of our national squad and our U23 emerging status. And the U23, as the title implies, is only for athletes who meet that age standard. But from being initially categorized there, you then will have opportunities to compete internationally. And once you're competing at international open tournaments with your club or province, you can move on to meeting national team plan criteria to compete with Team Canada at dual meets. Then others will be able to meet NTP criteria to compete at international tournaments with the national team. And then some people will be able to meet NTP criteria to compete at World Cups and World Championships. Once you've been able to move up through that system, then we look at the specific qualification for the Olympics. And there are 4 ways to do that based on all the information we currently have. It's specifically getting ready for 2028. And so the first and the easiest way to get selected for the Olympics is to place in the top 2 in your category at the World Championships in 2027. And that obviously needs to be in one of the Olympic weight categories. If you are not able to be a top 2 at World Championships, then the next opportunity will be at the Pan Am Games, where if you get a top 2 at the Pan Am Games, you will qualify to go to the Olympics. And of course, that again, only in an Olympic weight category. If you are still not qualified for the Olympics at that point, then you can get a top 2 at one of 2 Olympic qualifiers. We anticipate these will be World Cup number 1 in 2028 and World Cup number 2 in 2028. And a top 2 at either one of those will qualify you for the Olympics. Now, there are some very minor differences between weight classes where there may be more or fewer qualification spots available at any one of these tournaments, but this is what we anticipate going forward. Now, looking back at our U23 assessment camp that happened in Montreal about a month and a half ago now, Pardon me. The goal there was to assess the potential performances of emerging and U23 athletes. And we were focused on that age group, but not entirely on that age group. But we also took the time to really reinforce this need for an international style of boxing that is going to win points off of judges at international competitions. So, of course, we had a whole variety of selection criteria. We tried to make it as wide and open as possible. And we published that invitation list. The coaches who were there listed out here, and of course we had registration. I think it was a great opportunity for everyone. We had quite a large number of people at the camp. It was fantastic. We had more than 60 people in attendance. And out of that experience, everyone got a personalized assessment, and we were able to assess a number of athletes out of that experience to say that, you know what, we feel that based on the performance we've seen demonstrated, you meet the criteria to become categorized as one of our emerging athletes. For the athletes who weren't qualified or categorized as emerging, they of course got a fantastic camp. I personally think some of the best quality sparring that we've had in Canada this year. And certainly that was a great warm up for any remaining provincial championships or getting ready for athletes who are going to go to elite nationals. When we talk about those assessments, we were really looking specifically at the winning style of play assessments, and that was done by coaches at the camp and was reviewed by our national team coaches. So there is no specific score that an athlete can get to be sort of noted as emerging. What we are really looking for is who in our group do we feel, based on that performance assessment, if we sent them out to an international competition, specifically at sort of a world challenge level, do we think they would be within a reasonable opportunity of getting a top 8? And if we feel that was met, then the emerging status is granted. Because we want those athletes to get an opportunity to essentially to go and compete internationally and see what we can do. The whole idea between the emerging categorization is that we're seeing something in a younger athlete earlier in their career where we want to give them an accelerated opportunity to get out and compete internationally. And then looking at performance assessments. And so we have updated our performance assessments now and finished up all the assessing that we were doing at Elite Nationals. We have just shared this information with the provinces, and we are in the process of emailing all these out. So everybody who competed at Nationals is going to get a personal email with a personal report. But it's taking us some time to get those emails out. I think you'll appreciate it. It takes some time to put all those emails together and get them sent out, given that we had 130, almost 140 athletes at the competitions. But these are a look at sort of the overall stats. And we've made some changes based on some of the feedback that we got from last year. And some of that feedback was that we were too numbers oriented. So what we've done is we've tried to move away from giving people just a score. And what we've tried to do is go and relate in each of the 6 categories that we're assessing people, just using the evaluation criteria and the grid. Were you doing this characteristic very often, sometimes, rarely, very rarely, or did you just not demonstrate it at all during the time of the assessment? And what we were able to do is then take all that information together and combine it into these overall reports. So what we are looking at here is sort of looking on the left-hand side, a look at male performance, and on the right-hand side, women's performance, and looking at specific weight classes and where was that range of performance. And one of the patterns that we see in this data, and it's a pretty obvious pattern, so I don't feel like I'm going and breaking any secrets on this one, is that for the lighter weight categories, we're seeing, especially in men's 50 and women's 48, we're seeing a pretty high level of performance as assessed. What I think you need to remember, however, is that those categories are very small. So we're only seeing in those two categories semifinals and finals, right? So there's just not a whole lot of, there's no prelims, there's no quarterfinals, right? And so we're seeing good athletes, but were really only good athletes within those weight categories who showed up to nationals. So we're not seeing a full breadth of the category. What we're seeing is just the top end of the category. So I don't think that, I mean, it's wonderful that we're seeing great levels of performance out of those categories. There were some amazing bouts at nationals, but I don't think anyone should read into this thinking that, Boxing Canada is going to start, overemphasizing the men's 50 and the women's 48 categories. Um, I think this is just a reflection of what we saw at nationals. Now, each of these graphs is highlighting the highest scores that we saw within a category, the lowest scores we saw within a category, and the average scores that we saw within a category. I think it's also very important to understand that there were a number of stoppages, as there always are, in Olympic style boxing in tournaments. And when we have a stoppage, it doesn't give us very much to work with in order to do an assessment. So if you were an athlete who was stopped, then the chances that you were getting, a number uh, of assessments saying that you were sometimes, often, or very often doing something is probably quite low. So this is one of the reasons why we see so many of the categories, I'd say particularly in the men, hovering really low on this sort of rainbow graph of ours. Okay. I don't think anyone needs to think that they were a failure because of that. The reality is you got stopped at nationals. You learned something, I hope, out of it, and you'll come back even stronger the next time you're at nationals. Okay. What will say is when we looked at the data, we were actually feeling like we were a little ahead of where we were in assessments from last year's nationals, looking from 2024 to 2025. And I think mathematically, the average has gone up very slightly. So that is something that I think we all need to be very happy about, because the better we can all do in our performances, the healthier the entire program is going to be. And from my personal point of view, the greater the opportunity it's going to be for Canadian athletes to win medals internationally. So what is happening out of um, the results of Elite Nationals? So we've got our list of champions. So congratulations to everyone. We publicly have that up on the website, out on social media, and congratulations to each and every one of you. We have now completed our AAP carding. So that's the Athlete Assistance Program of Sport Canada, or also known as carding. And we've been able to finalize sort of all of our rankings for our priority 8 and priority 9 athletes. So that information is available already right now on the dashboard. So if you don't know how to find the dashboard, go onto our website, go into the participation menu. I'm an athlete, hit the athlete, and then scroll down to the bottom of that page where it talks about high performance programming, and there'll be a link through to the national team dashboard for selection. And so we've listed all of our athletes and where they are. We have also updated that dashboard with our categorization, right? So we have got our emerging status now in for all of our athletes, and our national squad status in for all those athletes. It is quite a long list of athletes, and we're doing that purposely because we're trying to be as inclusive as we can. But we have tightened up the categorization criteria a little bit compared to the previous year, because what we found was we had more than 60 athletes who were identified, but after just a few months, we saw very few athletes showing up for their monthly meetings with the nationals team staff, and we saw very few athletes continuing to provide us with training data. And so We are not going this year to go and reach quite as widely as we did last year. I would suggest it's more of a manageable list of athletes for the national team to take care of. Now, we've also been using the results of nationals for some selection activities. So obviously categorization and karting we've done, but we also put out for our January elite camp, sort of some of our HPD discretionary selections. For our January U19, U17, and Youth Olympic Games selection camp, we put out those. If you have not been contacted about that camp and you are interested in attending, please send us an email, info@boxingcanada.org, and we'll take a look because we are interested not just in having the right people for performance at that training camp, but also it's important to have, proper training partners. And if we're going to have opportunities for high quality sparring and you're interested in taking part in that, let us know. We will assess whether we think it's appropriate for you to be there. And we will, I would suggest, be erring on the side of more people rather than fewer people. Now, we've also made some selections for BoxAm, and that's the first competition of the year. Last year, our first competition was at the Independence Cup in the Dominican Republic. This year, we're going to Spain for our first competition. And we are attempting to take 2 athletes per weight category, assuming that we feel that we've got the right athletes available to start competing internationally that early in the season. Out of Spain, we will have then decisions around who will continue on to the World Cup and who will continue on to World Challenge or B-level events. We know what the World Cup schedule is. The first one we're going to Brazil, and the next one we're going to China. The World Challenges have not been announced yet, and we are starting to get worried that we're not going to see the promised 4 World Challenges being put on by World Boxing. If we don't have those events available, we will start substituting in other World Open events. So could be off in Bulgaria and Hungary and Czech and wherever. But high quality international opens where the national team, the B team of our national team, will go and will compete. And those will be considered equivalent to world challenges for the purpose of selection and points and determining who eventually gets to move on to later in the season Commonwealth Games and the Continental Championships. So looking to the NTP. So for 2026, it's been published since September, but I know not a lot of people have looked at it because every now and then I get an email or a text from someone who says, "Hey, I finally took a look at it, and there's a whole lot in there. It's a very big, cumbersome document." And I agree, it is. But philosophically, there's sort of 4 points that we want to emphasize. So one is we're trying to be as inclusive as we can. So we're trying to get in the mind that everyone is selected up until such time that you do something that essentially deselects you. And that isn't necessarily that you've done something wrong, but it could be that you were maintaining a level of performance and you are no longer maintaining that level of performance. So you essentially get deselected for, say, World Cup, and then you move down to World Challenge, or perhaps you're at World Challenge level. You weren't able to make sort of our goals for performance levels, and you essentially get deselected from there, and we move you down a level. So that relates directly to our next point, which is this concept of competition has consequences, right? So the easiest way, if you want to get selected for something, is to make the concrete standard that is part of the selection criteria. Most of our selections have a mix of, if you do this, you are automatically selected. And if you don't do this, you can do this. And if you don't do this, you can do this. And if you don't do this, then maybe we'll pick you up because we will make essentially a coach's discretionary pick at that point. But if you If you want to do the easy path, hit the performance targets that we're looking for, because then it is absolutely clear and there's no question. Okay. Now, another one of these things is philosophies that we're playing with here is this idea that everyone is being treated the same because we're treating everyone slightly different, right? There are athletes who are super young and we're giving them maybe extra opportunities because if we can get, some quality international bouts into them earlier in their career, that could have benefits later on in their career. We have other athletes who are older, and we know that if you have got a full job and you live halfway across the country or all the way across the country, that we need to treat you slightly differently with regards to selection for things. And we are trying our best to do that. And I know that some people can get a little miffed, maybe, that some people are getting opportunities because they're older, some people are getting opportunities because they're younger. Well, we're trying our best to balance off everyone's needs and everyone's special situations that we can. One of the areas where we can't necessarily do that is in karting. There are just some rules from Sport Canada that we have to follow, but that's why within our karting selection documents, we have a whole variety of different priorities where if you demonstrate performance, then you get carded. And then we move down and move down, and then we get into squishier areas. And then, once you get down to priority 8 and 9, it gets quite squishy. Right. And then the last one of these sort of philosophies that we're pushing is this idea of we're trying to have the right athlete at the right competition at the right time of year. And, no one is going to be able to maintain a perfect level of competitive readiness through the entire calendar. So we are mindful of this. And we have two really big events coming up this calendar season. The first is the Commonwealth Games, and the next is the Continental Championships. Both of these events are ones where we feel we have a good chance at winning medals. The Commonwealth Games is a very prestigious event, and Canada has a great history of medaling there. But it isn't really on the Olympic pathway at all, right? It's just a really great test. It's a great opportunity to compete against people from parts of the world that we don't normally compete against. But the Continental Championships, which also is technically not on the pathway to the Olympics, it is, however, a good proxy for what we're going to see at the Pan Am Games in 2027. We're going to be competing against the same group of athletes. It's going to be down south. And we feel that that is really the tournament where we want to put all of our efforts into. And the other thing about the Continental Championships is we have all weight classes there. And we have full opportunity to put athletes into each and every one of those weight classes. Whereas at the Commonwealth Games, it's only Olympic weight classes. And we only have 6 starting spots. So even if we thought we had, athletes in all 10 weight categories who could win medals, we can't take all 10. We only have 6 spots available, and that's a decision that Commonwealth Games has made. So we have to be very prescriptive around who we send there. And there could be athletes who are absolutely fantastic athletes who don't get to go to Commonwealth Games simply because we think we have a greater opportunity for medals with a different athlete. Okay, so want to make sure everyone has an understanding of that. Okay, specifically about the document, it is, quote, final, although we are constantly updating it because we constantly get new information. We are trying to maintain the visual flow chart. I was calling it last year the spaghetti chart, right? Which is a little bit like snakes and ladders. If you do this, you can go here. If you do this, you can go here. If you do really well here, you can get all the way over to here. If you don't do really well here, we're going to send you back home and you're going to requalify, and this is your next opportunity to come in. What I think is most important on that flow chart is this idea that you can start mapping out your season and thinking, okay, what is it reasonable for me to be able to qualify for? And then what's the next reasonable thing? And then you can start using that mapping in order to determine what are the fill-in competitions that my club or my province and I need to attend in order to really fill out my season. Everyone should be trying really hard to have between 10 and 15 high quality bouts per year. That's what we're attempting to do at the top level for all of our athletes between the A team and the B team, trying to find those opportunities for you. And when I talk about what is a quality bout is where you are going to go in and be challenged, but we be within arm's reach of being able to get a win. Okay. And so for some people, that's going to mean all the way up to the World Cup. For other people, that's going to mean, you know what? I need to spend lots of time focusing on nationals, national level tournaments, Quebec Open, the Canada Cup. And for some people in between, it's going to be a mix, right? And if you're feeling good and you're in good shape and you haven't been injured, then having an opportunity to compete with Team Canada at a dual meet or up at a world challenge level will be great. But after that, maybe you're going to need more time off just because your body isn't used to that level of competition and touring, and you do a few local meets in order to make sure that you're appropriately challenged. I don't think anyone should be registering for competitions where they feel like they're just going to be able to walk right over people. Okay, if you're not going to be challenged in a competition, then try to avoid it. Or if you're not going to gain anything through being at a level of competition, try to avoid it. And that's where I think we could probably argue that some of our athletes may have not felt as challenged as they would have liked to at nationals, but I think it was important for them to go to nationals because they hadn't demonstrated performance earlier in the season. You need to essentially requalify yourself, recategorize yourself in order to set yourself up for the next season. So, okay, moving on from there. Oh, there we go, my beautiful spaghetti diagram. So, like I said, this will continue to be updated, and I know that we've actually got one or two things that are out of date on here already. There had been a planned World Cup at the end of February. It is now not going to happen. We have confirmation of that from World Boxing. And then the other thing is we have now got sort of half hard dates for the Continental Championships. And this actually looks like it's correct when we're just trying to figure out what we're doing for that pre-camp at this point. So we'll harden this up as we go. So expect some updates over the holidays. Okay, looking at our Youth Olympic Games. So this has been a lot of frustration, I will admit. And it is frustrating for us. It's frustrating for athletes who, are age eligible for the Youth Olympic Games. And it has been frustrating for the Canadian Olympic Committee because they're not getting great information. It's frustrating for a lot of people. So this is what we don't know right now. We don't know the number of starts that we're going to have at the Youth Olympic Games. That is a huge problem because it could be that we have starts for each and every one of those weight categories. There are 10 weight categories that will be contested at the Youth Olympic Games, 5 for women, 5 for men. Or it could be that we only have 2 starts and we just don't know yet. The Canadian Olympic Committee has been told by the International Olympic Committee, who is responsible for running this event, that they won't release the number of starts available until May. And that is after the selection event that World Boxing says all of the athletes need to go to. If you think that sounds weird, you're right. It sounds weird. We are in a position where we are going to select athletes to go to the selection event in Thailand based on the results that we see in performance at the camp for Youth Olympic Games, U17 and U19 athletes, January 22nd, I think, well, arrivals are on the 21st, and then departures are on the 26th. That's where we're going to make our selection for athletes to go to Thailand in order to qualify, in order to go to the Youth Olympic Games. But we could send an entire team of 10 athletes to Thailand, which would be the largest team that we're going to send because we can only send one per weight class. And it could be that they all win gold medals there. That would be a wonderful problem for us to have, but it's going to result in a lot of disappointment if we find out in May that we only have 2 start spots available. So I personally have a really hard time recommending that if an athlete has their heart set on going to the Youth Olympic Games, which will be a fantastic experience, I guarantee that. I've coached at the Youth Olympic Games. It was one of the highlights of my biathlon coaching career. I have a hard time recommending that you spend what we are estimating right now to be $3,500, and that's the subsidized price to go to the Thailand event, with you not necessarily knowing that you could even earn a spot to go to the Youth Olympic Games. Okay, and we've put together our selection criteria for Youth Olympic Games. It's in the national team program. I encourage everyone to read it. But I have to warn everybody, this not knowing the number of starts that we have could put us in a very difficult position come May. Now, the one good thing about Youth Olympic Games is there is no cost to the athletes. There will be a pre-camp in Montreal, and that'll be happening in, I guess, late October. And then we'll travel as part of the entire Youth Olympic Games team, multi-sport team, from Montreal over to Senegal. And then compete and have fun and enjoy the games, and then all travel back. We'll get everyone back to Montreal, and then from Montreal, they'll then continue home. Okay. If you have any specific questions about this as an athlete or as a coach, particularly if you're one of these athletes who meets the eligibility criteria, and that's born between the 14th of November 2028 and the 31st of December 2029. If you are one of those athletes, and that's a pretty narrow window, and you are really interested in going and you have questions, please contact me. Okay. Oh yeah, I just talked about all of this, didn't I? Well, that was poor planning on my part. But selection criteria. So we will take the best ranked athlete at the Youth Olympic Games qualifier. So that's the Thailand event. Dates of which we don't know yet because no information has been sent out by World Boxing about it, other than the fact that it's in March. We will take the best rank, final placing within categories. So we will compare women's 48 against men's, whatever the heaviest men's weight, I think it's 80. Okay. We'll just take who was closest to the top of the podium, and we will start filling in our start spots based on who is closest to podium. And we will continue until we've finished all of our start spots. If we end up with more athletes than we have start spots and there is a tie, we will go with the athlete who had to win more bouts at the qualification tournament in Thailand. If there is still a tie, then there will have to be a discretionary pick, and we will look at the performance assessments that we did at the Youth Olympic Games qualification camp. I didn't actually write camp there. Oh, sorry. No, we will make, sorry, apologies. I just buggered that up. We will look at assessment of performance at the Youth Olympic Games qualifier, so in competition assessments. So we will have assessing going on at the event in Thailand, and we will be taking video back and using that video for national team coaches who are not in attendance in Thailand to have their opinion on who was able to perform best on that winning style of play assessment. Okay, in case of ties. I am very hopeful that we have 10 start spots available for us, but I caution everyone, it could be as low as 2. And if it is 2, this is going to be a huge, huge problem. Okay. Talking a little bit more about the Youth Olympic Games slash U17 slash U19 camp and our elite camp. So both camps going on in January. So we've got the dates there. We now have the full camp schedules published. You can get them off of this document, or you can get them, they're also in the national team program document. So if you're interested in looking at what the blocks of training are looking like, please take a look. If you have any questions, email us. Looking ahead to U17, U19, U23 nationals. So we've got our dates, March 18th to the 21st. We have direct selection for the U19 World Championships this year occurring at that event in Calgary. Okay. The handbook is published. Registration is open for that championships. Okay. It is to be done by provinces only. If provinces decide to share the access code so individuals are registering themselves, that's provincial business. But you have to qualify through your province. We are co-hosting that national championships with the Canada Cup Open Tournament. And that Open Tournament, it was just announced yesterday by the Pan Am Confederation of World Boxing. So all of the North America, Central America, and South American countries. That is one of 2 events on the continental calendar. We are really, really finally hoping that we will get some international competition there. I make no guarantees because we've been burned before on this, but I'm very hopeful that we will have some of our continental compatriots, at least some from the States and Mexico. It'd be nice if we can get some others there as well. There is another event going on at the same time, and that's the Fighting Spirit Indigenous Novice event. It is novice only. We are doing direct matchups for those competitors. And the idea is for our Indigenous members to be able to get their first competitive experience in an Indigenous-only environment. We are looking actively right now for as many Indigenous RJs as we can find to be able to make sure that we're able to follow through on that. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to our event. Now, I know there has been some controversy around our stay to play package deal that's available, which means that you don't pay for registration if you stay in one of our partnered hotels. There was some language around that being mandatory. We've cleaned that up. It is not mandatory. However, I really have to say, we get a lot of money from Tourism Calgary based on trying to fill hotel rooms. And we have not been able to do that in any of the previous 2 years. We've not actually met our obligations. And the amount of money that we're getting from the city of Calgary has been cut dramatically. And if we want to be able to continue hosting high quality events, we're gonna have to find ways in order to meet the needs of these people who are, willing to dump tens of thousands of dollars into our events. So I really, really encourage you, take a look at the available hotels because there are suites available, which means kitchenettes, so that if you're, really concerned about weight cut, and obviously a number of us are in this sport, that you will have access to your own kitchens and be able to cook your own food. And you don't necessarily need to have a kitchenette for every one of your hotel rooms that's being used. So, one kitchenette room that the coaches are in, and maybe a handful of other rooms that aren't, it could be a nice mix. And the occupancy is based on 4 people per hotel room. So I think the hotel room comes out to $169.99 at $170. If you divide that out amongst 4 people, it's not a bad deal. Okay, so please at least consider it. We would really appreciate it. Okay, looking to upcoming dates. So, of course, our camps coming up, the U17, U19, and Youth Olympic Games selection camp in January, and followed immediately by the elite national team camp. It'll be nice. We've got sort of a bit of an overlap going on there. It'd be really nice to see so many people in our gym. That's really exciting. Then we move immediately to Boxam, and that's in Spain. We've got selection criteria that are already out for that. And thank you to everyone who was selected and who've already put in their payments. That really helps us to be able to get those tickets purchased early. Then we've got that Youth Olympic Games international qualifier. We don't know when in March that's going to happen. We just know that it's going to happen in March. Of course, details are in the national team plan. We also have a World Challenge Cup that is scheduled, but we haven't seen any details on it. So we'll probably be, in all honesty, we're probably going to be looking at substituting another international open event for that. But we will have an event for our B team athletes in March. Okay. Then we've got Canada Cup and the U17, U19, U23 nationals. So that's in Calgary. Again, we were just talking about it. Plus, it's got the Indigenous tournament there as well. Then looking on to what on our schedule looks like World Cup number 2, although it may end up being the first World Cup of the year in Brazil. We will be doing a pre-camp in Brazil. The Brazilians are very excited about having us come down for this camp. We're excited too because they're a fantastic team to work with. And we didn't go to the event in Brazil last year because it happened in the middle of Ramadan, and we're not interested in having international level competition during Ramadan. So we've got that, and then on this schedule, we're jumping straight ahead to Commonwealth Games. Just want to make sure everyone knows when those are. The final selections for Commonwealth Games. We have to register athletes by name at the beginning of June. So if you are looking to secure your spot to the Commonwealth Games, you really need to make sure that you're performing well early in the season. So that's performing well at Boxam, performing well at the World Challenge World Cup, and potentially at the second World Cup. I can't remember when the second World Cup is. It's in China. And we'll be doing a training camp in just south of LA with a trip up to LA to see the Olympic venues during that camp. Okay, and then Youth Olympic Games, we've got, of course, at the end of October into November. There is also Continental Championships that'll be happening in the fall. We don't have exact dates for that. However, we believe it will be happening in Panama, which will be fantastic because if we don't have to go all the way into South America, that'll be great. Panama is always just an amazing place to visit. And of course, reminding everyone, our elite nationals will be in Cape Breton, and we are just finalizing the exact nature of those dates. But it will be in late November, keeping with sort of this pattern of trying to have our nationals as sort of the last major competition before everyone can take a bit of a break. So we anticipate having registration information start for that, fingers crossed, early in January. Okay. Okay, and looking to our next HP update meetings, we're looking at January 22nd and 23rd. If you are looking for any of the slide decks to any of our previous HP update meetings, they're available on the web, as this is available on the web. And of course, any of our other Boxing Canada Committee, advisory group, or update meetings, you can find all that information. And of course, recordings of this, I'm assuming you're watching a recording, are available on our YouTube channel. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. I hope everyone has a great holiday, and we'll see you guys in the new year.